Welcome back to another installment of the Bay Junction Video Journal. I think this is our 21st installment, as a matter of fact. Layout's wrapping up, but today we're going to take a look at some of the signaling work that Andy Sperandeo has been doing. And then I thought we'd walk around and show you just a little bit of how the trains will operate on Bay Junction once it's all complete. So let's get going.
Well, I put in signals for the junction. It's set up as if it were the end of a controlled siding in a centralized traffic control system, which is what we would plan to have for the whole layout. So we've got a signal bridge here with the two-head signals. This one governs the mainline track, and this one governs a train coming from the Wisconsin Southern yard and through this crossover onto the MR&T. The signal here actually governs the end of the passing track, or the train going into the Winter Hill branch line. Then at the far end, just past the road crossing, there are a couple of block signals, one on the main line and one on the branch coming up from Winter Hill. But the signals are only a part of the whole installation. Controlling the signals in real life, you would have a building like this. Relay house is what model railroaders call them, but the signal professionals that I know refer to that as a bungalow, a nice cozy term. And all the controls for the signals and the turnouts around here are in that building, and it operates automatically with remote inputs from the dispatcher's computer. Nothing can happen here unless the equipment in that building sees that it's a safe situation, and only then will it respond to those control inputs. Along with that are all the things that are controlled here. The turnouts, the powered turnouts, all have an electric switch motor. These are actually dummy castings made by Details West in white metal, and they're on the head blocks of each of the controlled turnouts. These represent the power motors and the electrical connections for them, but of course these things can all be controlled manually as well. There's two levers on the side of it, one for taking the motor off power, which means to local control, and then the other lever that actually operates the switch points when it's off power. Those levers have to be on the side away from the rails, and that meant that I had to drill a couple of extra holes because some of these motors are turned opposite the way the manufacturer thought that they would be set up. So every place there's a controlled turnout, there's one of those. However, there are also interesting things that go on at the turnouts that are not power controlled. Any turnout in this signal territory has to have an input to the signal system. So the signal system knows if that turnout is open or closed. And that's the job of the little relay box next to the turnout on the head block. There's also an electric lock. Now, this works differently in different systems. Sometimes the lock has to be unlocked by the controlling computer from the dispatcher's office, but sometimes it can be unlocked locally just with permission from the dispatcher. Either way, you have a fixture like this, the electric lock, and this actually has a rod that comes under the switch points that would, in real life, lock them up when it's closed. And along with all of that, there's a little switch stand in there because something has to actually operate the points. So you have all that stuff plus the switch stand.
All right, Andy. It looks really good. Nice work.
Thank you.
One of the more fun jobs when operating our MR&T layout is working the Bay switcher. And so that is a switcher that is assigned to Williams Bay, and it not only handles the switching here, but it gets to run out on the line a little bit up to Lake Beulah as well as down to Winter Hill. Let's take a turn on the Bay Junction switcher and see what it's all about. Bay Junction is actually a pretty busy place, and so this is going to be a simplified overview of how a typical day in Bay Junction works. We start the day with an early morning transfer run from the Wisconsin and Southern coming up from Troy Junction to Williams Bay. They drop off a cut of cars within the transfer yard, and since there's nothing to take back right now, they head back engine light. Next, Williams Bay sees a couple of different commuter trains. They are called M-Rail trains. These are runs that go between Milwaukee and, in this particular case, this one will go all the way to Troy. It switches over onto the Wisconsin and Southern from the MR&T, making a stop at the Williams Bay Depot on the right side of the station. and then it continues on down the Wisconsin and Southern branch line all the way into Troy. This train will come back later in the day. Our Williams Bay switcher today is GP38, number 835. There's a variety of tasks we need to perform, the first of which is to clean out the cars we've got in our yard in order to move them over to the Wisconsin Southern Transfer, things that are going back to the WSOR. We push them here into the transfer yard, and while we're here there's a boxcar we need to get that's going to go to Lake Beulah, and so we pick the southern car up out of the transfer yard. We'll leave the rest for now because there are some other things that we need the space for at the moment. A number of trains use the main line while we're working, and so we have to be aware of what's going on around us. This is a coal train that's destined for Milwaukee and the Wisconsin Electric Coal Plant. Here's the Milwaukee-bound train passing over the Turtle Creek Bridge. That's a lot of coal. With the coal train in the clear, the dispatcher has given us the main line so we can make our run up to Lake Beulah. This is a town to the east of Williams Bay, up the big hill over Summit. Today we have a boxcar for the feed mill, and we've got a couple of hoppers for the grain elevator. After making our switching moves in Lake Beulah, we are returning with an empty boxcar, and we are returning with a loaded grain hopper. And we'll take those back to Williams Bay with us. They will be picked up later by one of the other trains, carried on to their destination. Once we get the cars back into the yard, we'll spot them onto an open track. The next thing we'll do is we've got a couple of grain hoppers that are loaded at the large grain elevator in Williams Bay, so we'll pick those up. We'll tack those onto our train as well. There's a train coming from Port Marquette Yard headed for Rockford, and so at the moment our Williams Bay crew is going to try and get as much out of town as they can. The cars that we have set aside on our track at the moment are for the Rockford run. Rockford train is also going to bring us some more cars too, it looks like, for our local industries. So extra 8577 takes the siding so it can make the pickups and setouts. Cars on the head end are the cars that have been blocked for Williams Bay, and they include cars that will also go to Winter Hill, which will be one of our jobs yet today. The crew of extra 8577 pushes the cars into our track to make the pickups. While they're busy working, another M-Rail train makes its stop in Williams Bay. This train will actually just sit here for 10 minutes and then turn around and head right back to Milwaukee. As the crew of 8577 is finishing putting their train back together and making their pickups and setouts, the M-Rail train passes by. Extra 8577 pushes cars back into our track, and then the engines connected back to their train, and they head on their way to Rockford. Rounding the big curve and heading out of the passing siding and west. All right, with the Rockford train clear, our Williams Bay switch crew now gets back to work. First thing we'll do is clean up as much of these cars laying around our yard track as we can. There are 2 fertilizer cars to pick up from the fertilizer plant, and then there is a new one to drop off. We also have an empty gon that will be filled with scrap metal. We push into the Kelly Appliance spur. And then there are 2 grain hoppers to leave at the grain elevator as well. Now the cars that are left, the 3 hoppers and the boxcar, are all destined for Winter Hill, and so we're going to push those out of the way just for a moment and complete some of the other switching here in Williams Bay. So we've left those cars sitting on the engine track. Kelly Appliance has 2 boxcars full of refrigerators and stoves to head out of town, and so we will connect those as well to our cars sitting on our pickup track. All right, with the local switching pretty well handled for the moment, we hook onto our hoppers and the boxcar destined for Winter Hill, and we head down the branch, crossing over the culvert of Turtle Creek. Here we are crossing Turtle Creek again, this time on the low bridge, and heading into Winter Hill. Now we'd love to show you the switching in Winter Hill. Unfortunately, the turnouts here need to be replaced, and so therefore we have positioned the cars about where they go, and our switcher now heads back out of town until some further track work can be done. The next step is to pick up some cars that are going to be bound for Port Marquette, because the next train that will come through our area here will be a train that will carry our transfers from Williams Bay to Port Marquette. And so we've got 3 box cars that were sitting on the Whistler that are destined for Milwaukee. And there are a couple of corn syrup cars that are ready to leave the corn products transloading facility, and so after sorting those cars out of the stack, we pick those up with the rest of our train and pull them out of the way, crossing under the highway overpass. With the industry switched and our transfer cars pulled and ready for pickup, there's nothing to do now but park the switcher and mark off duty, and that's the end of our day on the Bay Junction switcher. The day for Williams Bay isn't over yet, though. The Wisconsin and Southern sends its afternoon transfer run to collect any cars in the yard or drop off any. Today they run light, but they have 3 to pick up. Well, that should give you a little bit of an idea of how things are going to run on our Bay Junction Project Railroad. I got to get my Wisconsin Southern transfer back down to Troy Junction at this point, but you can learn more about operating this layout in the June 2011 issue of Model Railroader magazine. And as always, thank you for watching.